This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. The podcast features conversation for musicians of all types and genres, a curation of expertise intended to help all musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love, make music. This episode is powered by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, How to Get Booked and Paid What You're Worth Over and Over Again, written by Roberto R. Hernandez. That's me, yours truly. Learn more about the book at unstarvingmusician.com/book and on Amazon. Hola amigos, it's Robanzo, aka Roberto. Or is that Roberto, aka Robanzo? Anyway. If you're a regular listener, you know that I recently celebrated a milestone, which was my 25th episode of the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. That episode featured an interview with Mike Dawson of Modern Drummer Magazine and the Modern Drummer Podcast. You should definitely check it out. Well, this is another milestone episode. It's the first to feature a live guest performance, which I think you're really going to enjoy. I enjoyed the heck out of it. That performance and today's interview was by acclaimed music educator David Barrett, who has made his living as a professional harmonica player. But he's most widely known as one of the top educators for harmonica. And as a music educator, David has published 70 books and CD sets and has also published 4,000 plus educational videos. That's a lot. All of this is part of his music site, bluesharmonica.com. If you're a music educator, this episode is especially for you. If you're a musician, you too will find inspiration in our conversation. David's an extraordinary individual. He's very self-motivated, has a keen appreciation for systems, believes in giving value to others, and has come to really appreciate community, particularly among his students. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, he also founded the School of Blues located in San Jose, California, which is dedicated to teaching musicians the art of blues, but also the art of being a better musician. And it's not just for harmonica players. During our discussion, we talk about the evolution of his educational programs, business, marketing, and gear. He shares a fascinating story. He's a great listener, really knows his stuff where business is concerned, and has a true passion for teaching. I hope to have him back on the podcast sometime soon in the not too distant future because this was a really fun conversation for me. All right. Please enjoy this conversation and live performance by David Barrett. David Barrett, welcome to the Unstarving Musicians Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time. I want to start the show off mentioning that I read in your bio that you have over 3,000 video lessons at bluesharmonica.com and wanted to ask you, A, how does that feel? And B, can you share a little bit with our listeners of the journey, how you got to that point? That's a lot of lessons.
Oh, sure. So bluesharmonica.com, if I go a little bit back, and maybe we'll talk more about this as the interview goes on, but just a quick synopsis of kind of what brings me here today is that I started teaching harmonica when I was 18 years old. Not that I felt like I was qualified, but when I would go into the local music stores, they would commonly ask, hey, do you teach harmonica? And I'm thinking, okay, I'm 18 years old. I know nothing about teaching. But everyone was continuing to ask because there were so many people at that time that were asking for harmonica lessons. I finally gave in one day, figured, well, I'm going to school, going to college for music, and I could use kind of a side job to make some money. I'll give it a try, as long as you know that I don't have any experience teaching, but I got a love for the blues harmonica. Gave it a try. Well, the first thing, there wasn't any material for blues harmonica. Though there was books that would say blues on the cover, it was Kumbaya and When the Saints Go Marching In on the inside. Nothing about actually technique and approach, anything to have to do with really how blues harmonica worked. So I spent a lot of time, definitely more time in my private time, preparing materials, essentially, that will eventually turn into a book, for my students. I taught at Showcase Music Institute in San Jose, California. And instead of doing a fourth week lesson, so we do lessons first, second, and third weeks, we would do workshops. So all my students could have the opportunity to work with other instructors, and other students have an opportunity to work with me. We did 2 workshops on that fourth week, and one of them I decided, I'm going to take each month, I'm going to think, research, really do a lot of listening. When I say research, it's really listening, because again, there wasn't material out there on the market, very specific to one technique. And what I did is each month I would present that technique And at the end of the year, I figured, well, I could have a book that I could shop around. So a year later, I did shop it around, and I was very fortunate that All Bay Publications picked it up. Again, because of the lack of blues material, All Bay was very open to anything that I would submit to them. So now I have around 70 products with them, books, CDs, DVDs, etc. And that took a good decade of my time where I was specifically, if I wasn't teaching private lessons, every moment was focused on writing material. I then went to doing harmonica masterclass workshops in 1994. That became a really big thing. Started doing workshops around the country, sometimes outside the country, but usually 3 very large ones, East Coast, West Coast, and the Midwest, and then smaller classes that would tailor to the smaller states and such. Anyways, did that for many years, and then opened School of Blues in 2001, at the end of 2001, officially opening the doors January 2002. And that gave me a physical kind of home base. And as I continued to do all these other things at a certain point, the school pretty much was self-sustaining. The books, it became very evident to me that print media, at least in the education world, was going away very fast. And with the quality of video cameras and the price, quality going up and price going down, and just the proliferation of YouTube videos, what was happening it was very evident that this was both evident that it needed to happen, and also it was an exciting thing for me. We're talking around 2007, I made this decision. I had the chance to completely rewrite all of my material. And it was a little bit daunting to think of, but I flipped that switch and thought, no, this is pretty exciting. I've dedicated my life since I was 18 years old to teaching harmonica and writing about it. I now have a new forum, a new opportunity to present the education of blues harmonica. And then I spent about 2 years putting together an outline and really thinking about, okay, if I'm going to redo everything and make it better, I really want to make sure it's done right from the beginning. And what then became bluesharmonica.com when it released in December of 2009 was the idea of having all the different forms of education, a strong part being the video and interviews. I've always wanted to have the opportunity to be able to sit down and not just a basic interview like, wow, you're a great harmonica player, when did you start playing? But actually a harmonica player with a harmonica player being able to talk the cool nitty-gritty stuff that other harmonica players want to know about his interviews. The shortest ones range from an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, but some of them go up to 4.5 hours. It's just because we're sitting there really enjoying the conversation and sharing this, and they know it's a legacy thing too. I want them to share with whatever they want, whether it's actual technique or actually their approach to music. That's, of course, important for those that come after them to be able to benefit from. So going back to the videos, the idea of, okay, I've got lesson videos. I have the music notation, of course, in PDF form. So they got the visual of the videos. They've got the visual of the PDF, something they can work with offline, then MP3s of me recording these study songs that I write for them. And then on top of that, hearing what these great harmonica players have to say about the techniques or concepts that they're learning in the lessons. So I got very excited very quickly with the idea that, wow, I have the opportunity to have all these different learning modalities on this one's website, and just started working really hard. And as the core lessons were going up, I was also doing things that like the interviews, for example, that I thought were both a legacy thing, but also fun for the students. And I would have submissions. Akarsha Kumar, Aki Kumar, who you just interviewed in the podcast recently, was one of my contributors early on. So as one of the quote unquote new bloods, what's the perspective of the new blood, you know? And I'd have other contributors on the website, like the West Coast's great Gary Smith or Mark Hummel, for example. And those are kind of YouTube style where they'll sit in front of the camera and they'll share something. But it was fun for the students to be able to kind of be a fly on the wall on some of Mark Hummel's great blowouts. Anyways, as that stuff was happening, I was developing the main material. And as time has gone on, now it's over 4,000 videos on the website. And it became more from after I got the content up, or as I was getting near the end, it became very evident to me that it was more important now, instead of moving from a model of scarcity, where this material, when I started teaching, was not available, to now we pretty much have everything figured out. I can confidently say we have everything figured out for the blues harmonica, these techniques and approaches. And now that the material is up there, I've moved to the mode of helping students navigate that material in the most efficient way possible, and also keeping them motivated. So what I've been focusing on actually more as of late is a program called the Levels of Achievement program. And it's essentially, if you think of it as like a black belt system, as they go through the cross-platform of the areas of education, which is music theory, study songs that I write for them, so that's technique and vocabulary and motion, solo harmonica playing, which is just a harmonica player jamming without a band, creating that toe-tapping rhythm, music theory, improvising, and accompaniment playing. That way they have these 5 areas that are important to a harmonica player's education, and they're tested along the way. And it's helping to really keep students motivated, especially the ones who are definitely tend to do better in systems and such. So it's been really fun being part of that arc from the beginning where there was nothing to the point now, which is a problem that there's too much information. And now it's to help them go through that information in a logical manner and also keep them motivated along the way. Because I sure never needed motivation. Every little piece, every little nugget that you would work so hard for, you would chew on for so long because you never knew when that next nugget would come along. Now there's too many nuggets, and it's an interesting problem to have. But the website, a lot of videos, over 4,000 videos now, and I'm very happy to say that, but I'm probably even more happy now to say that with a program like the Levels of Achievement program, it's really neat to see that arc that the harmonica has gone through, that now it's a problem that they have too much information, because it sure wasn't that in the early 90s when I started writing material.
Sure. So I don't know if you knew I'm a drummer, and for the past couple of years I've been a subscriber for a site for drummers, not too different in theory from your own, through an educator named Mike Johnston out of Sacramento. And one of the bits of advice that I heard that has really stuck with me is try to focus on being really, really good at one thing as a drummer, and spend a year doing that, because otherwise you end up chasing all these, as you call them, nuggets. There's so many different nuggets that you could be chasing when you're learning, and learning an instrument, as you know, is just like an ongoing thing. You can always grow. So that was a great piece of advice for me, but it sounds like I'm sure that your students have a similar type of struggle if they're newer and they're just all these different things that they want to grasp right away, but it takes time. You gave me a lot more questions for a little bit of clarification. So in 94, you started the workshops, but I just wanted to get some perspective on the availability of curriculum. So was it just a year or two before that you realized there really wasn't any good curriculum out there?
So 94 was the beginning of the Harmonica Masterclass workshops. The reason why the Harmonica Masterclass workshops began, and then I'll go back in time, was that I had already been teaching private lessons. So let's see, I was born in 1973, so 83 and 88. So I started teaching harmonica in 1988. And by 1994, I remember one of my classmates in college saying at one point that it was interesting for her to see recitals of like violinists, for example, and they have a head instructor, and you could watch their bowing patterns. All the students have the same bowing arc and movement as their teacher. She found it very interesting that they all became little clones of their instructor. Besides being amusing, it made me think down the road. Later, I'm like, okay, am I turning all my students into little David Barrett clones? Obviously, we're studying other artists and such. It kind of fostered the idea of, we got great blues harmonica players. I mean, this whole greater Bay Area, well, all of California, really. The Los Angeles scene for blues, and then the San Francisco and North scene for blues is fantastic, always has been. And still to this day, this is the hotbed of blues harmonica players. The world's largest grouping of harmonica players are still in California. So my thought was, why don't I give my students an opportunity to be influenced by other harmonica players? And I'm sure, even though a lot of the players of that time, still to a certain degree today, but more so back then because everyone learned by ear. So it was easy for me to come up with an education program, because by the time I started teaching, I already had quite a few years of music theory training, for example. I was already learning, even though I started playing saxophone in 3rd grade and did that for many years, in the 8th grade trumpet. And then in college, I played French horn. Even though I had that side of things, I saw the educational process of how someone would walk them through the educational process when learning music. And the harmonica players that came before me did not have that, even though some of them would go to a JC, for example. But my point is oral tradition. They listen, copy, try to use. And so they didn't have that reference point of when they would teach an instrument. They didn't really have the same vernacular or the idea of putting lesson plans together, or maybe I should break down these techniques. Or like for me, I write my students study songs, in other words, known as etudes, right? that no one would ever thought about that in the blues harmonica world, but because I had the classical world of music education, that was like, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. I'll do transcriptions of the masters, but I'll also write songs so they're not hitting their head against the wall too often. One of the things about the harmonica that's so challenging is once you get past the basic kumbaya stage where you can play single notes, that's where your studies begin. And the two techniques in the harmonica that are studied, or the main areas of study on the harmonica, are what's called bending and then tongue blocking, which is an embouchure on the harmonica. And some techniques, especially bending, man, they just take a lot of time to develop. And what happens is a student gets to that upper beginning stage and they start to learn some of these cool techniques. They feel like, okay, I'm about to have what I need to start playing what I hear on the radio or on my recordings, but they don't. And it's all of a sudden, harmonica is a very technique-rich instrument. They might randomly pick a lick from Little Walter, and there literally could be 11 techniques in that one lick, and it's very discouraging. A lot of people, that's when they stop playing. That's when I would write these etudes, but no one who came before me would ever think to write these type of study songs. But anyways, my long-winded point is that even though these harmonica players I was bringing in may not be teaching them specific techniques in a way that they feel like they can go home and take a syllabus home and study, they're going to share approaches and maybe some of the techniques or ideas that they feel were important to them in their own development or their quote unquote aha moments that they can share with my students. And that was the first workshop in 1994 that started the Harmonica Masterclass workshop. And the students got so much from it. They got so razzed about it. The artists loved it. And I got so many people. I think I got 86 people with essentially zero advertising. To do that today would be difficult, but that's what started the workshop. And then it just got bigger and bigger, and people are flying in from all around the world because there wasn't anything like this. Joe Falisco around the same time was doing something as well. I think that was the Augusta Heritage Festival, but I hadn't heard about it, and I don't think it was very widely publicized. So that was the workshops. As it goes for teaching harmonica, developing material, that was immediate. So as soon as I started teaching when I was 18, it became very evident that, okay, if I'm going to teach somebody, I need to start developing materials because there was a lack of it. Before then, for blues harmonica instructors, it would be more like, this is the typical story. They would play a lick and the student would play it. It wouldn't be quite right. They would shake their head and go, that ain't it. They would play the lick again, expecting them to do better the second time, That's the typical story you hear about, like Peter Madcat Ruth taking a lesson from Big Walter Horton, for example, or at least just sitting down and copying the masters. But at that time, we just didn't know all the techniques. There was no names for it. Everything is a hidden instrument. We call the harmonica a blind man's instrument. It's neat that you see a blind person playing a harmonica, like, oh, wow, they're great at the harmonica. It doesn't matter whether you're blind or you're sighted because you can't see it anyways. It's in your mouth. And like a vocalist, I would say that it's the correlation is very strong to someone singing or especially someone teaching. A lot of the techniques I'm talking about have to do with language and other things that they have a comfortable grasp on to help them, like a metaphor does. It helps to bridge that which is difficult to understand and something that is easy to understand. For using phonetics, for example, can help me to get their tongue, in most cases for the harmonica, in the right place to be able to tune their mouth for a bend, for example. So a lot of the process and a lot of the reasons why these techniques were mysteries is because nobody can see them, even the player who's playing them. And for all of us, most of our techniques just developed by trying to trial and error. And a lot of times we didn't know what our body was doing to create the sound that matched the sound on the recording. Gary Smith, for me, when I was 16, was very instrumental in teaching some specific techniques. Even though he didn't go into a lot of depth, he gave me enough. That was my spark that I can explore from that point on. But my thing is I'm a systems type of person. I really like to take an idea or a concept and break it apart and give them the chunks to help them develop. And that's just kind of in my nature because that's the way I like to learn. And that's the way I like to teach.
Well, how lucky for the learning public. I wanted to ask you too, I think that you mentioned your publisher early on, and if you didn't, can you go ahead and mention it now? I just wanted to catch the name and the spelling of it.
Sure. Yeah, it's Mel Bay Publications. And Mel Bay was a great jazz guitarist and was very famous in his day. I've worked with Bill Bay, which is his son, and Mel Bay was right there at the forefront, if not the first, around the first, to create the home learning methods. Even though there's been books that teach yourself X, Y, and Z since the turn of the century, they really turned it into a thing, the book and the audio cassette. And I remember being happy that I was picked to be on Melba because Charlie Musselwhite and Phil Mencken had a book called Power Blues Harmonica, and my thought was, boy, is that cool to be on the same publisher as Charlie Musselwhite, you know?
Yeah, totally. Do I understand you also that about the time that in history that we're talking, just back in 94, I mean, I never thought about it until today as we're talking, but for any of the well-known music schools that are colleges that are around today, harp was something that you wouldn't find. Is that right?
Oh, no.
Okay.
The harmonica is it's essentially a novelty instrument in a lot of people's minds. To a certain degree, I understand it kind of is. It'd be like the song flute, for example. It has, not that I've played one before, but I think it's got the major pentatonic scale or something like that. It has select notes. You don't have a full chromatic instrument. And then the idea with that is that, okay, you're going to have limited notes, and the music god is going to choose these are the right notes for you. And I'm going to take all the wrong notes away, and that's what allows kids to be able to play instruments and have fun with it and learn music without the distraction of a whole bunch of wrong notes in there. Because if you sit down at the piano, as we've seen kids do, and they start banging away, there's plenty of wrong notes in there, right? They have educator bells that teachers will go into schools and work with pre-K and K, and they'll literally pull out the bars of the xylophone with their own little individual chambers and hand them to the kids. So they're actually choosing what notes they're playing and in what given key, and all they have to do is have some rhythm, and they're making some music. Harmonica is very similar to that. It's such an amazingly simple instrument, but I've played most of the instruments that are out there, classical and popular, and harmonica by far is the most complex in its ability to have so many different combinations. It's just a comb that directs air, a reed plate that holds the reeds that vibrate, and a cover plate that keeps your hands from hitting the reeds and stopping the sound. That's it. That's the harmonica. And an amazingly straightforward, simple instrument. It was made to basically play German folk music and just simple melodies. It's made to play the major diatonic scale, for example. So it has never been considered a serious instrument because of that, but also more of the players. Who doesn't have a harmonica sitting around in their drawer somewhere, And you just huff and puff. And so many times I've told someone I play harmonica professionally, and after a little giggle, like, I didn't even know that.
That was a thing.
Yeah, exactly. I just kind of huff, let alone make a living at it, You huff and puff and you just kind of have a little fun, then you put it away in the drawer. It doesn't seem like something that you would study. So in college, actually in my later years in college, I was already a published author, but that didn't mean anything. I needed ensemble credit, for example, when I was going to De Anza College. That's why I played French horn, if I could have played the harmonica. Now, every now and again, you'll get a chromatic harmonica player. The chromatic harmonica is quote-unquote fully chromatic, where the diatonic is essentially just made to play the 7 notes of the major diatonic scale. And those who are familiar with modes, you can get multiple modes, and those are called positions. So really with a C harmonica, you can play in 7 different modes, in other words, 7 different keys, and each one of those modes has a different feel. And as you start to incorporate bending, you're able to make the harmonica chromatic, not in each octave. The harmonica has a 3-octave range. But you do have all 12 notes in music, and not available in each octave, but that's part of the charm of the instrument. Is you try to figure out, where can I make this happen? And then Howard Levy would be a good example of someone who really pioneered, wasn't the first, but the player who pioneered a technique called overbending, not just standard bending, where you really can make the harmonica fully chromatic. So through experimentation through the years, harmonica players have figured out how to get out of this very simple instrument a lot more than it was ever meant to do. I kind of think of like a program. We all have like programs on our computer that was really meant to do one thing, but because it has some special qualities, it's like Microsoft Word. I mean, doing graphs and even artwork. I mean, it was really never meant to do that well, but we find a way to make it work. So I think of the harmonica as kind of like that. It's that one program that does one thing really well, but you kind of find it does some other things really well too, but you have to like put a lot of work and time into it. And sometimes we ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Why don't I just get a program that was meant to do this other thing? But it's like, no, I'm able to do this, and I'm kind of enjoying getting to know this one thing. And the harmonica, because of its simplicity, I feel, me personally, if the harmonica didn't have its mysteries that it had, if I didn't have to go through that discovery process myself, or some of the things are being amazingly easy and some amazingly difficult, if it didn't have all these challenges, I'm sure I would have stopped playing a long time ago, because the harmonica is endlessly fascinating. And yeah, so that's interesting. Such a simple instrument ends up being something so complex. And yep, in college, definitely you could play the kazoo as far as they were concerned. Harmonica, kazoo, this musical saw.
Well, I had never thought about it, and it came to mind as we were talking about the early years of your journey here. And speaking of which, can you talk a little bit about the motivation for creating and the evolution of the School of Blues in San Jose?
There's always been a strong blues scene in the Bay Area. And one of the fun things about the school is that Frank DeRose and Kevin Coggins, my bass instructor and drum instructor, when I was 16 years old and I was playing jam sessions at JJ's Blues in downtown San Jose, they were actually running the jam session with Tommy Castro. And they're now the instructors at School of Blues. I just think that's such a neat thing that they were giving to me in the jam sessions. And I remember Frank, he called me up. He'd say, great job at the jam. And why don't you think about doing X song at the next jam? And he's still doing that today. He's part of my house band training program at the school. And it's so neat to have people that are so invested in the growth of the students and also I wouldn't necessarily say the preservation of the music, because we're simply just teaching the music to people who love it. So it doesn't need to be preserved because people want to do it anyways. But I knew there were people out there as dedicated as I, like Frank and Kevin and John Garcia, who's passed now. But John Garcia, who just loved the music. And I thought, when my grandfather passed away, he gave the grandkids a little bit of money. And I used that seed money to start the school. So for me personally, I wanted essentially to have an office to run my harmonica masterclass company, my workshop company, a place where I could go and focus on my writing as well. And a place where not only, and this was the big thing about the school, what would commonly happen in the music stores that I would teach in is that a student would come into their little cereal box of a teaching studio. You would teach them for a half hour or hour, depending on the length of the lessons, and then they would leave. And I managed a music store for 6 years in Morgan Hill, and it was very difficult to get instructors to work together to create something together. It would usually be this piano instructor uses this church on this date, and no one was working together to create what I thought could be something greater. And what I wanted to do for my students was I wanted to give them context. Instead of them just coming in, learning the harmonica, I want to give them context, which means, hey, there's going to be blues guitar students, there's going to be blues bass students and drummers. And what I wanted to do is have combined recitals and also eventually training programs. I'll give you one example of one of the cool things that we do at the school. It's a house band training program. What we think of as instructors is like, what would have liked to had when I was growing up in the music? What opportunities can we as instructors, because of our place in the industry and the school, what opportunities can we help create for them? I've always thought that not only is it a good idea, I think of it to a certain degree as an obligation. If I have the ability to really give opportunities to people, I feel that it's also my obligation to help that. So the band training program, once a student is ready to start playing our jam sessions, they play our jam sessions. Once they're ready to have a concert in front of family and friends, which we know is very nerve-wracking, we'll have them in our student concert that happens twice a year. And then if they show a propensity to want to play more and to keep growing, every 6 months we have 2 new house bands. And over this 6-month period of time, they come in and different instructors will run it at different times. When they're working with me, for example, they'll work with me 3 hours once a month plus our jam sessions. And they come in and we teach them what it means to play in a band. We go through all the different grooves. What's a shuffle, a backward shuffle, a double shuffle, a T-bone shuffle, a Chicago shuffle. And we walk them through all the different grooves and show them how to play that on their individual instruments. Openings, endings, breaks, hand signals, how to run an effective jam session, how to put effective set list. And these students are the bands that provide the backing at our jam sessions. So not only they're learning how to play in an ensemble setting, and after 6 months, we really feel like they have all the tools to either enter a band or start their own band. The neat thing for the students is I let them know all the time, this jam session's for you. It is not a performance. It's your opportunity just to give a new song that you're working on a try. And guess what? Who you're playing with, this is not a professional band. They're not going to be looking down at you because you make a couple mistakes, because these are students as well that have been there. So students playing with students, and we really work hard on creating a real nurturing environment. Even where we played, they've since built a stage, but there was no stage. So the Poorhouse Bistro right now, and has been for many years. There's no lights. I mean, it's just like us getting together and playing. It's evolved a little bit from that, but it's still, we really work hard to keep that nurturing environment. So what School of Blues for me was the opportunity to bring us instructors together to have a place that we can say we all love all styles of music for the most part, but what we really love is blues. And wouldn't it be cool to have a place that's what we teach? And if someone wants to learn a little bit of country or jazz, sure, that's fine. But to be able to have a place where you can study specifically blues and be around other people who want to study that, because it's difficult to find. Obviously, we're to a certain degree a subgenre. We're a specialty school. That was really cool. And I've been very fortunate to have the instructors that I have. All of them are the original instructors from January 2002, except John Garcia has passed, and now we have Johnny Cat, who's a phenomenal guitarist, and really enjoy having him at the school. So anyways, that's it. We do private lessons. We record the lessons. If a student comes in, they bring a thumb drive. We digitally record all of the lesson. So when they go home, they can study it. And like my students, they also have, not only do they get the jam sessions and the student concerts, I also do harp night every fifth week Tuesday, where we get together, all the students get together, and they play a little bit for each other, and we talk. It's a combination of social and giving them a chance to, especially my newbies, a chance to play in front of other people. And a big thing that I found that was for the school and for anyone who's thinking about starting their own music school someday, and I think anyone who teaches, there's kind of in the back of their head, it'd be really cool to do my own thing someday. What I learned right away, really soon, was, well, two things. One, I knew I needed to provide quality instruction, just myself with my students. So that's obviously a given. You need to provide a quality service for your customers. But what I wanted the school to offer too was that synergy of everyone wanting to do blues and give them the context of being able to play with other people. But thirdly, what I didn't think of ahead of time was community. What they are, when they come in, they're paying for lessons. They're coming in there or joining the community of School of the Blues. And the things that I can do to help foster that community, like harp night, for example, or a holiday party or something like that, and the opportunities that they are provided by being part of our community, that's really the big thing. I used to be probably too driven as an instructor and too serious and too focused. As the years have gone on, I've learned, this is just something, as I've taken classes in martial arts, for example, or a new hobby recently is kayaking, so I'll go out and take classes. This is a fun part of their life, and they need to really enjoy when they come into their lessons. Not only are they going to grow, and grow slower than I was because I was on fire. I'm not going to get a whole bunch of David Barrett students. I'm not going to get a whole bunch of Aki Kumars, for example. But the relationships that I've developed, the friendships I've developed through the years, that's well worth it right there. So community, that was something I didn't realize at first, that became very evident that people are coming into the School of Blues community. So for those who are looking to open a school someday, you really need to think about that and create a community that you like to be a part of. I think of that a lot too, is that really what I've done is I've created the community that I want to be involved with. So that's a pretty neat thing. I'm fortunate.
On the community aspect, did you find that your students and faculty inadvertently or unknowingly sort of led you in the direction of letting the community become what it has become? Or was it more of your own doing?
No, I think that was a lesson they gave to me, because I'm generally, as a personality, I'm very driven. And when I've done workshops in the past, for example, we would start at 8:30 in the morning, and I want to give them value. So basically my idea of value was stuffing down their throats and ears and as much as they could possibly take in, which really meant they just left very overwhelmed. And I've since learned, as you talked about with your drum instructor, that be a jack of all trades and a master of none, or take a very specific thing and get really good at it, from which that mastery then can develop to mastery of the other styles or other approaches on your instrument. I completely understand that. So for me, the focus was give them value, and I learned, no, I'm not giving them value, I'm just giving them too much, to making them freeze. Yeah. As I've learned to relax more as a teacher and enjoy the student more and enjoy the journey that they want to go down, I work with students every day, and there's some that just really like to talk. And a lot of times in my mind, all the time in my mind, like, hey, if you were just to not talk right now and actually do what I want to do with you during this hour, you're going to walk out the door being able to do a lot more than this path we're going down at this moment. And I was talking to my girlfriend Sharon about this. Like, I'm getting better at just let them talk a little bit. They have something to share. Let them share it. I don't need to get all worked up about like, oh, I really want to show them this, And I've just found everyone has their own pace. Some people, man, we don't talk much and we're just doing. And man, they accomplish a lot. And some students, that's not their journey. Their journey is to enjoy the lesson, enjoy the time, play some music. If you can give them one thing. So for my talkers, that's my goal. I want them to walk out the door with us doing reps enough on one thing that I know that they can chew on that one thing until the next lesson. And I know they're growing because of it. So for me, it's been more learning how to relax a little bit and allow that process to happen. And the community thing, I didn't understand at first because as time went on, I'd have students say that, I know I'm not practicing very much, but I really enjoy to be into music and I enjoy our lessons. Like, oh, they actually enjoy the process of the lessons, not just with the end result that it gives them. That's something that's definitely come over time. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's fascinating for me that we're having this conversation on a couple of fronts, but I'm a community manager for something non-music related and more small business related, and it took something that's been going on since 2009, and I had a background in before then, but it took me a while to realize that community was such a big part of why people were interested in what we were doing and with them and for them, and all these things that you talked about, learning, like letting people talk and not trying to drive so hard for what you think is perfection is something else. And then that you mentioned a couple of words you've used, including community, but also value. I think before we even got on the phone today, I was rereading some stuff on you and had noted that you were very big on always wanting to give value. And it's something that I hear constantly from my mentors and other marketers today. And just kind of interesting to me that so a good ways back, you were thinking in those terms for student musicians. It's very cool. I want to shift gears just a little bit. That's really good stuff on the School of Blues. And it's fun to hear some of these people's names who I know and have worked with. But it looks like you do gear review as part of the bluesharmonica.com facet of your life, and maybe School of Blues too. Like, for instance, I saw that you recently had some posts on Twitter and Facebook for some amp reviews, and I'm just kind of curious how long you've been doing that kind of thing as part of all of this and how it had come about, and is it a big deal for both your business, your relationships in the business, and for your students?
Gear, as you know, as a musician, one of the fun things about gear is it doesn't matter how good you are. You can be a beginner or a professional. You could be like challenged by certain techniques and feel real crappy about your current place in life as a musician, but you can always talk. It's like talking about the weather. It's a safe subject. It's fun to get into the history of the gear. It's fun to try out different gear. And it can be sometimes people spend way too much time obsessing over gear and not practicing it enough. I think we all fall in that sometimes, but it's also part of the journey as musicians because that is our tool. And as we find our own voice, we find the gear that matches what our voice is, what we're trying to present in our music. And of course, it evolves over time. Once we figure, this is the drum set that I'm going to have until I die. There's something valuable about that, saying, this is good enough and I'm going to grow with this equipment. And we're going to grow together, and I'm going to get to know this set intimately. But as a drummer, you find out, okay, a lot of times you go to a gig, that ain't your drum set. And it's like, okay, if I get intimate with this one drum set and my style kind of revolves around really knowing this set well, then that's a weakness as well. When it comes to harmonic, it's the same thing. So part of it is like, how do you go to a jam session and play a rig? And a lot of times, some jam sessions, the harmonica players, they just don't have very good equipment. And I give them some tactics of like, okay, do this, and do that. Or someone just contacted me recently from the website. They're going to do a tour and they're asking what amp should they ask for. And I say, okay, well, get the 1959 Bassman reissue, but make sure to bring these tubes with you and you're going to swap the tubes. It's going to make a big difference in your sound, But gear has always been something that we've really been into in the harmonica because there's been a lot of mojo, a lot of misinformation for the most part about the microphones because the microphones are from the 1940s and 50s. And there just wasn't any information about that, and also the amplifiers. Well, that stuff, for the most part, is generally known. Recently, I've done a lot of focus on classic equipment because that's pretty much what all of us professionals use. the one thing recently that got me on this kick of doing amp reviews, I'm specifically doing small amp reviews, but I'll eventually go into larger ones as well, is I felt that it's probably a disservice to focus only on classic gear because, one, it's more expensive. Two, it's difficult to get their hands on it. Three, if they do get their hands on it through eBay or something like that, who knows what type of condition it's going to be when they get it, and the difficulty of getting someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to vintage gear. And then lastly, even if they did have access to it, they're not really good enough players to plug in and find out, is this a good enough sounding amplifier anyways? There's technique that it takes to pull the tone out of an amplifier and a microphone, and there's also, from your body to your hands, etc. So I figured, okay, even with giving general recommendations, that'll get someone in a ballpark, but can we find new amplifiers, for example, that can get the job done? And fortunately, recently, even the cheapest amplifiers are doing such a good job with amp modeling that you can get a $100 amplifier. And I was just very surprised recently. Like, wow, it's not a tube amp, doesn't have that big resonant sound, but it comes pretty darn close. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. So basically, I've bought every amp that makes sense. I've got 9 amps just sitting in my room right now, and there's more coming, that are small amplifiers for harmonica players to use for practice, recording, small coffee house type things. And I'm going through each one of the amplifiers. And then I remind myself at bluesharmonica.com that I've always told myself from the beginning, even if it takes a little bit extra effort, if I think something's going to be a good idea, do it. So what I've done for bluesharmonica.com is not only when the amp comes in, I go through the specs, I play it just for a moment and kind of set it up quickly. And then I'll try it with all the common microphones, from a cheapie that a new player might buy to a full-on professional mic. So I use 5 different microphones that I check it on, and I show them how to dial in the amp to sound good with each one of those mics. Then I go into the recording studio. One of my rooms at School of Blues, I do Pro Tools audio recording. And I put the cameras on, and I say, okay, what you're hearing right now, me recording, is just the camera microphones, the ambient sound in the room, which is for the most part the best example of what an amp sounds like in its natural state. Then I go onto the computer, and there's a camera on the computer that's showing me going through and adding the effects and any EQ, what I do to make that amp sound good, or what we find is any little areas where the amp's a little insufficient, whether it's in the bass response or it's too punchy or something like that. So I show them actually how I edit it, and then they have the MP3 audio files when we're done as well, so that if they find like there's 3 amplifiers that they like, they can line up the audio files that they saw me record. They can make a decision afterwards which one is going to be the one they're going to get. Then lastly, I do my full review, and I just go through multiple points of build quality, tone, ease of use. Is it upgradable? Can you, in other words, plug into a speaker cabinet? And I've been having a blast. I'm careful not to go down the endless pit or the rabbit hole of equipment because it doesn't make you a better player. But there are periods in my life where years will go like, no, I'm not doing equipment because that doesn't make you a better player. And I don't like doing workshops and stuff on equipment either. Say, if we're in the same room together, I'm going to share with you stuff that's going to make you a better player. You can mess around with equipment on your own. But this, I know, is a good service for students, and the students are excited about it because it's something tangible they can get. And then they can truly say, I heard the amp reviews. Dave likes this amp, speaks highly of it. I've heard it. I think it sounds good. Now I got the amp. Let me now live up to the possibility of this amp. So with all that said, I'm a gear junkie, so I'm really enjoying the process.
I think this is really fascinating, though. So I listen to a drummer's podcast with some regularity, and in fact, one of the hosts is a managing editor at Modern Drummer magazine, and he also does a lot of gear review. But you said something that made me realize I've seen him do this, and that is to talk about gear that may not be, as you referred to it, the classic gear or the highest end, but talk about how some gear or gear in different price ranges can serve and what their positive points are. And surely for a harp player and a drummer, when you're walking into jams, you never know what you're going to get. And it's kind of cool, I think, that you're doing this now and branching into the new gear, as you said, and giving people at least some idea of what they might experience. And they're probably learning tricks along the way.
Yeah, definitely setting up the amplifier is something that a lot of students are saying that I'm really enjoying these. I already have an amp that I like, but I'm actually learning the process of how to make an amp sound good. Yeah, it's anything that can save somebody time. It's like, I've already been through it, so let me share with you. Another thing, too, I like to do is, even though I'm very familiar with all this stuff, I do like to remind myself that, or take the extra step and do a little bit more research on some of these things. I have some friends who know about the ins and outs of electronics more than I do, and I like to call them up and have some conversations, because I want to make sure that I just don't get into this habit of assuming that I know all there is to know about this. It sounds good or doesn't sound good. One of the things I did too, an amp came in that I don't like very much, but it's like, it has some qualities that I think a beginner will like. It's like, it's too distorted and it's too like kind of muted bassy. Well, harmonica, we like distorted and we like muted bassy because our harmonica is so bright and tinny. And I still did the review saying, okay, I don't recommend the amp, but you know what? We're going to do a little amp trial. And that's why I'm keeping all the amps before I sell them. I'm going to have students who want to come in. I'm going to give them a half hour in the room and just say, go have fun. And I want you to list which amps you like the best. I bet the amp I didn't like very much, and that every other player, the professional player that played it, didn't like it. I'm having a feeling that quite a few of my more beginning students are going to love the amp.
You're making me think of blind wine tastings here. And I'll
Yeah,
mention why,
that's exactly what it is.
That's great. I think that's a great idea. And you probably know how those things go. The less expensive, sort of fruitier, and just for lack of better descriptors for the general public, kind of sweeter or residual sugar kind of tasting wines tend to do really well when people don't know the price of it. So I think that's a cool idea. That's a really cool idea.
I'm going to do that with the professional players. I'm going to let the other students see the amps and try them, but they don't have the bias of who made them and any cachet of a certain model number or something like that. They won't be aware of that. But with the professionals, they will. So I'm going to have them, I'll take Gary Smith, for example, and I'm going to have him dial in each amp, make it sound as good as he can. Then I'm literally going to turn them around or put a screen up, and then I'm going to switch around the amps and switch the order of them and have him go through and actually play them and see if his mind gets changed. So we're going to have some fun with that. I think that it's a lot of time and a lot of effort to do this type of stuff. But in the end, if I give myself the gift of time to do this type of stuff, it's fun.
I know it's not your motive, but I suspect that put out there into the interwebs that you'll have some of these manufacturers courting you who may not already be for more stuff like that, and it could only benefit your students as well.
That's true.
I would like to ask you, we're kind of close to the end of our time here, but would like to ask you a little bit about marketing. As I was looking at your online properties, the bluesharmonica.com site, School of Blues, Facebook, Twitter, it looks like maybe this is bluesharmonica.com specific, but it looks like, I don't know if this is fair to say, I was going to say it looks like the majority of what you're doing now is through Facebook, but that may not be accurate. It may just be that that's a great place for you to build awareness. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of the online marketing side of the business and what kind of things you've noticed?
Sure.
Appreciating or not appreciating about it?
Oh, sure. I'll tell you that Facebook brings the least amount of customers to the website. And I've noticed that for workshops too. When I promote workshops, I get, generally speaking, very little business comes from Facebook in my world. When I started bluesharmonica.com, I was fortunate that I already had a very large, relatively large for the harmonica world, customer base. Because at that time, I would sell my books and other materials. I used to manufacture harmonica equipment as well, cases and microphones and cables. And that time is now past because there's not as much money in that anymore.
Your student body, if I can interrupt, was that in the beginning and today still largely email?
Yeah, because it started off as working in conjunction with mail order companies when they were still around.
Yeah.
Where we would do cross promotion. Basically, Mel Bay, this is something that really helped my business early on, is Mel Bay, as a printer, they printed a brochure, which actually was 16 pages. And in those were all my books. And then I went to the mail order company, says, I will pay for the printing, which Mel Bay did. I will pay for the shipping. All you need to do is provide your mailing list and you get all the sales of the products. So what happened is they got this mailer that went out. They got all the sale of the products, which were my products and Mel Bay's products. So we're happy. And I got use of their mailing list. At that time was over 20,000 harmonica players across the United States to know about my workshops. And that partnership really was the beginning of the Harmonica Masterclass company really becoming global. The database that I built from doing workshops for a decade before I even started bluesharmonica.com, let's see, it started in 1994. Well, not a decade. 2009, yeah. So 15 years I've been developing a customer base before the bluesharmonica.com even released. So I had all these customers via email and also private students, of course. And when I started bluesharmonica.com, I sent an email out. I also did postcards. Postcards have generally worked well for me. Those postcards went out.
Is that still true today, by the way?
Yeah, postcards are still effective, yeah. I don't know how much the efficacy, but I find that works well because my demographic of customers tend to be in the 45 to 65 age range. Always have been and are still are. They'll tend, even though they're online, they still like physical products. That's why books are still viable to a certain degree at this point. So for bluesharmonica.com, that initially was that. And then, of course, using Facebook for whatever I could, which would generally be for special things like a contest to get people out of the woodwork who were kind of on the fence. The big thing for bluesharmonica.com, again, was a partnership, is that whenever you buy a Hohner harmonica anywhere in the world, right on the cover, it says 1 month free lessons with this purchase. And inside it had information on bluesharmonica.com, and they redeem 1 month for free at bluesharmonica.com.
Wowza.
We've been doing that now for, it's been 5, maybe 7 years.
That's pretty big.
Yeah, it's definitely a big deal. And before, when we were doing it, I never saw anyone do it. Now it's commonplace. You buy a guitar and it says free online lessons at fender.com, that type of thing. But I don't remember seeing anyone else do it before we were. But that was and still is the main way that people are drawn to bluesharmonica.com. Facebook, not much so. Facebook more is to give people awards who have done their levels of achievement program, for example. But it's also good to kind of keep active. I've personally recently moved off to Facebook just to be more present in life, but I still have a business Facebook page. Before I closed down my personal one, I invited everyone to join the business side of things.
I saw that. I think I remember a day when you were on there with a personal account, but yeah, I saw that. And I'm sure it helps with your community, an extension of your community.
Yeah, no, Facebook definitely has some value in that regard. So anyways, I'm keeping it more of the business side because as an artist, as you know, your personal side and your business side sometimes become a little bit intertwined, which is okay to a certain degree. But as the years go on, I prefer the personal time, as you know, just gets more and more valuable as the years go on. And I choose to spend it more being present than spending it in this virtual community. So I'll keep that more of a business thing now.
I love that. Okay, wow. There's a ton of other stuff I want to talk about, but I think we should save it for possibly as your schedule permits in the future, maybe a round 2.
Yeah.
This was really fun. I was hoping that we could close our conversation with you playing for our listeners for a minute or however long feels good.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So we'll say our goodbyes and I'll play some outro music for you guys.
That would be fantastic. And again, thank you so much. It was wonderful having you on the show, and take it away, please.
Thanks. Yeah, and I've enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm happy to get into more specifics on any of the business side of things as well. And if we want to do a part 2, I'm all game.
That would be awesome.
All right, here we go.
That was awesome, man. Thanks for doing that.
Sure, my pleasure.
Hey, this is Robonzo. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play Music. If you liked this podcast, please leave a review. This episode was sponsored by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs. How to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. Available on Amazon and in audio format as the Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. You can also learn more about the book and companion podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/book. Are you a gigging musician, recording artist, songwriter, or touring professional, perhaps struggling to get your music out to the world? Struggling to get the gigs you want? Pop over to unstarvingmusician.com and sign up for my email list. I'll send you occasional emails about upcoming episodes, expert tips and advice, music, musician resources, and anything else I come across that might make your journey better and brighter. The Unstarving Musicians podcast is edited by Juan Perez. Are you a podcaster? Would you like 20% off on editing of your first 4 episodes? Visit the show notes for this episode for a link to Juan's freelance profile or unstarvingmusician.com/resources and mention you heard about this offer through the Unstarving Musicians podcast. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.